What is up, fellas, and welcome to another special episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. This is the second video in my little mini-series where I am fact-checking people debunking the Predynastic vases, and the first one where I'm addressing Night Scarab. He has 3 videos out, so I will be doing 3 videos on him. So yesterday, I opened up a new bag of coffee. Same brand, same roast that I always use. And I made my coffee the same way I always do, 2 heaping tablespoons of coffee. And I majorly overdosed on caffeine. This batch, for whatever reason, is just way more potent caffeine-wise. So this morning I was smart and I made my coffee with 2 level tablespoons of coffee, thinking that that would solve the problem, and it didn't. I have all day yesterday and today just been profusely sweating and like having muscle spasms. I'm still tweaking at this moment. It's a weird sensation to feel your eyelids sweating, but the show must go on. So, don't say I'm not dedicated to bringing you guys content. Before I get into the actual fact checking, there's a couple things that I want to establish. For one, I don't have any negativity towards Night Scarab. Unlike Dan, who I think is a garbage person, I have no issue with Night Scarab. Yes, I'm going to be critiquing your videos, but I have no negativity towards you, and I don't want this to come off as nasty in any way. I'm not trying to start a beef. A friendly debate is my goal here. Second, I guess, what is it that I'm actually defending here? What is it that I'm trying to prove? First of all, I'm not defending Ben. I am here to defend the reality of the vases and not Ben. Ben is one person. He's a small part of the vase scan project. There are many people involved. Everyone involved does not share Ben's opinions. I do not share Ben's opinions. Ben's words aren't very important to me. They don't change the reality of the vases. Ben says a lot of things, not all of them are true. A lot of your video is dedicated to calling out Ben. I'm not going to skip over these parts because they're intermixed, but it's just not what I'm here for. I'm defending the vases. So am I defending the idea of ancient high technology? It really depends on what your definition of ancient high technology is. And this might seem like semantics, but it's actually very, very important. You are trying to disprove ancient high technology, and I'm trying to debate it, but no one has defined what it is. So without a clear definition of what high technology is, it's really hard to debate. And I'll give you a couple examples of potential definitions. The first example, what's ancient or what's high technology? Well, we don't know yet. We haven't achieved it yet, right? And by that definition, it's ever-moving goalposts. Anything that we find in the past, you could just raise the ceiling and it wouldn't fall into the category of high technology. That's a pretty unreasonable definition. A more reasonable version of that would be our current technology. Whatever our current technology is, that's high technology. This has a somewhat similar problem as the last definition in that it's ever-moving goalposts. What was high technology 100 years ago wouldn't be high technology today, and what's high technology today won't be 100 years in the future. But you can at least work with that definition. You have a snapshot of now. You can directly compare what we have now with what's in the past. And under this definition of high technology, there's actually a very strong case to be made that these vases are proof of exactly that. I'll be making that in the video. The third definition would be my preferred definition, which is any technology that is sufficiently more advanced than we would expect to find in that civilization. An example being a gun in ancient Egypt. I don't know if you would consider a gun high technology today, but it would be for ancient Egypt, right? The Antikythera mechanism would be a good example of this. It doesn't require any sci-fi technology or laser beams or anything like that, but it is well beyond the mastery that we would expect to see in that time period. These vases absolutely meet that definition of high technology, and I'll be making that case again in the video. So I think that's all I need to cover before jumping into it. I am not going to cover the numerology stuff. I just have no interest in it. But otherwise, I'm going to play through your whole video. We're going to go on 1.5 speed because it's a long video. And I'm going to address all the points you make as you make them. So let's go ahead and get into this. God, I can feel that caffeine just coursing through me. Alrighty, here we go.
In fact, one of the vases in the current collection also comes from very deep antiquity and has impeccable provenance.
So this one was brought out by the Czechoslovakian ambassador to Egypt in the late 1800s, and provenance is indisputable.
Unfortunately, this provenance is very peccable and very disputable because there never was an ambassador of Czechoslovakia to Egypt in the late 1800s.
Coming out swinging before even the intro, you're making some accusations here. So I happened to find this. I didn't do research in an effort to disprove anything you're saying, by the way. I just saw your videos, thought they were interesting, and wanted to research more. And I happened to find this. And I later realized that this is actually in one of the papers that you linked in your description, or didn't link, but you referenced in your description. And if you can read that right there, what it says is a last model from the 1 to 3 dynasties is a miniature granite coal pot, which is a collection of the Czech diplomat Stanislav Kovar. So that is from one of your own sources that you linked. Could that be your Czech ambassador that you're looking for? I think it could be. But let's continue listening to what you have to say. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong tab. My apologies. There we go.
This video compiles a few observations on a set of vases, claimed to be mostly from Predynastic Egypt. Their surfaces are said to be very regular, with deviations in the single thousands of an inch.
Other figures being returned were around 5 thou, 2 human hairs.
If the vases are from Predynastic Egypt, it would be an unusually high manufacturing quality for that time.
So just want to point out, you're acknowledging that these are abnormally precise for the time. These are well outside of what we would expect to find from pre-dynastic Egypt, a civilization that was still developing agriculture.
There are artifacts like the Antikythera mechanism, which can be described as technologically unusual for its time. But before said vases can be discussed as such, their case needs to be stripped of all tall tales, fallacies, and false claims about the viability of a forgery or modern machining capabilities. Let's do this step by step.
So I think it's very telling that provenance is not only your first line of attack, but it was pretty much the first line of attack of every single debunker. And I think it's very telling because it belies the underlying reality, which is that these vases pose a very real problem to the narrative of Egyptology. They are well outside of what we would expect to find, given our current understanding of Egyptology and pre-dynastic and early dynastic cultures. Jesus Christ, I am shivering here because of the caffeine in me right now. My muscles are shivering. But let's continue to listen. I do think that the fact that everyone attacked the provenance first does just go to show there'd be no point in attacking the provenance if these vases are what you expected to see, right? If this level of precision wasn't a problem, there'd be no point in attacking the provenance.
Let's start with provenance claims. The provenance of the unusually regular vases is said to date to 1980s or 1960s, so they can be a modern forgery. The provenance of one vase is said to be 1800s, but it's not clarified if that specific vase is unusually regular.
And has impeccable provenance.
So this one was brought out by the Czechoslovakian ambassador to Egypt in the late 1800s, and provenance is indisputable.
This provenance is either erroneous or made up. Here's why. 1. There had never been a country called Czechoslovakia prior to 1918. Historically, there was Bohemia, today's Czech Republic, but in the 1800s, it was part of Austria-Hungary. 2. Very few ambassadors, if any at all, were in Egypt in the 1800s. Before the founding of the League of Nations, ambassadors were rare and only sent to major powers. Missions to lesser countries, like Egypt in the 1800s, were headed by consuls, agents, etc. The first Czechoslovakian consulate in Egypt opened only in 1920, and it became an embassy in 1956. If this provenance story stems from some mistake, it has to be corrected. As stated, the story can't be true.
You're not gonna believe this.
99 cents per month for a year.
What?
No.
I'm doing this live. That might happen.
As far as documentation, there's an odd contrast between how measurements and provenance are treated. The measurements are shown and scans published. The provenance is only asserted. No actual documents are ever shown.
Okay. Well, at the time of this video, they hadn't released provenance info, but since that video, they have. Here are some tweets from Matt Bell. These are all vases, different vases that he's providing provenance for all of them. You can check these out on your own. I think this is the provenance for that vase right here. Another one here, Predynastic vase, that if there's the provenance right there, okay, from the Barakat collection. Another vase with another provenance proven. And these clips are really cool to watch. I'm going to go ahead and let this one play. You can see just how perfectly balanced this thing is. Quite incredible. He's going to give you a look into the interior, which you don't often get with these vases. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, there's a whole list. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong tab again. Geez, there's a whole list, but you can see how perfectly balanced that is. There's a whole list of vases that he has now since provided provenance for, many of these going back to, the 1950s. Again, another vase with provenance. So hopefully, geez, I keep forgetting to switch between the tabs. I apologize, fellas. But there's another vase with more provenance. Another vase with more provenance here.
Everybody, just want to give a quick update on.
So hopefully the provenance arguments can be put to bed. They've provided plenty of evidence at this point. The accusation that you're about to make, which is that they aren't very forthcoming, I'm going to let you make it. We'll go back to your video and continue listening.
The same applies to carbon dating.
The carbon dating results in something that's needed. So
A claim is made, but no data shown, in contrast to scientific papers, where data is open for public scrutiny.
So that's what I find the most interesting right there. You compare these guys to scientists and say that the scientists have their data open for public scrutiny, and you accuse these guys of withholding information. One of the most incredible things about this vase scan project has been just how forthcoming and open they are with all of their data. If this was done under Egyptologists, none of this data would be released yet. This whole project is still ongoing. They're still in the midst of the work. They are releasing it as they're collecting it. That would never, ever, ever happen with scientists. And even after everything had been completed, one of the major points of contention in science in general right now is that they are not forthcoming with their information. That's a huge issue in science right now. So comparing the vase scan project, one of the most transparent projects ever, and accusing them of withholding information and saying they should be more like the scientists and more open with their information, it's a bit funny to me, because it's just not representative of reality whatsoever.
The original scanned vase is called Predynastic.
Scan and analysis of a pre-dynastic granite vase, and it was made before the civilization known as dynastic Egypt ever started.
False. Such vases can be predynastic, early dynastic, or even Old Kingdom.
Okay, so he's talking about a specific vase, claiming it's predynastic, and you're saying that's false. It could be in any of these kingdoms. It seems like you're reaching a little bit here. Let's continue listening. Let's continue let you reach a little bit.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter to me if this vase is considered predynastic or if it's from the Old Kingdom.
It's irrelevant what matters to the vase scan project. The correct term for this vase style, and thus its alleged origin, is predynastic, early dynastic, or Old Kingdom.
So you just heard Ben give a little explanation there. I mean, he's just saying pre-dynastic because it would be unreasonable to give that full explanation every time you reference the vase of it could be Old Kingdom, pre-dynastic, etc. But you insist that he has to use the full terminology every time or else he's committing a sin, apparently. This is very important for later, for something that you do in this video. This might not seem relevant, but you're setting things up for a very tricky little mental trick for later in this video. So keep that in the back of your head. And as far as the argument about this being Old Kingdom, pre-dynastic, etc., here's a little segment from a research paper. Amounts of stone vassals, fragments, and in some lucky circumstances, splendid examples of completely preserved or completely restorable specimen worked out in the most... Sorry, didn't need to read that first part. The second part was the relevant bit. Late in the first dynasty, and particularly since the middle of the second dynasty, stone vessels making started a rapid decline, undoubtedly both for the increasing importance of other forms of artistic expression, etc. Okay, so you're making this argument that he's committing a sin because he's saying pre-dynastic rather than, Old Kingdom, etc. The vast majority of these vases are pre-dynastic. That is who was making these vases, were the pre-dynastic people. So no, it's not false, and what you're asserting is actually false, but let's keep listening.
Next is a claim that seems to be an outright lie. First, the description of the original vase.
Even with the OG vase, the original granite vase, with a known history going back to the 1980s.
So its history goes only to the 1980s, and its age is only guessed from the style and material.
How do we know if it is really pre-dynastic? I'm personally confident that it is. It certainly matches the form and style of other pre-dynastic vases on display in museums, and it's made from the same rose granite as is the box in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid.
Okay, so what he just said is pretty important there, because this entire vase scan project only originated because of the vases that were on display in museums. So these people like Ben were going around to these museums and seeing these vases that seem to be in a different category from everything else around them. They seem to be far more perfect. And so that's what inspired this entire project. That's what inspired Matt Bell to go out and collect these vases and measure them. So this entire issue of provenance, again, I've established that Matt has provided provenance for his vases at this point. But it just doesn't really even matter to me. It doesn't even really make sense to me, because you still have all of the vases in the museums, many of which are directly linked to burials. And the vase scan project is currently working on scanning these vases in museums with impeccable provenance. And sorry, my computer just popped something up randomly on me, distracted me. So I'm quite confident that we will see very similar levels of precision in those vases as well. I don't know this for certain but visually they look distinct from these other vases. It's the whole inspiration for this project were the vases in the museums.
But in a subsequent video, a striking new claim is added.
Based on its form and where it was found in a pre-dynastic burial.
If the provenance only goes to 1980s, and the age is only guessed from appearance, how do we know it was found in a pre-dynastic burial? If there's no documentation of this find, it sounds like an outright lie. Given the false claims and the lack of provenance documents, it's strange to hear complaints about lack of response.
Objection or coherent responses to this data, it's been radio silence.
You can't complain about indifference at the scientific level if you don't offer provenance documentation that's on the same level.
There are archaeologists, Flinders Petrie in particular, Egyptologists, who have been discussing lathes in pre-dynastic Egypt for decades and decades now. It gets ignored by the mainstream. So why are they ignoring their own colleagues when they talk about this? I don't really subscribe to your logic there.
An art dealer is named seemingly to add credibility.
The two other precision-made rose granite vessels are classified as predynastic, like the original vase, and have established provenance going back to the 1960s, when they were acquired and then held in the personal collection of antiquities dealer Fayez Baccarat, the fifth-generation owner of a globally very well-known establishment in Israel.
The credibility problem here is that on his own page, Mr. Barakat says that he deals with Maya crystal skulls. Yeah.
You really got him there. You really got him there. Look, Fayez Barakat is one of the biggest, most renowned, well-respected art antiquities dealers in the world. If you want to deal with art antiquities, there's a good chance you're going to be dealing with Barakat. Attacking, again, this is all towards the provenance of the vases, which has been established now. We have the provenance established, so this whole argument is mute. But yeah, it just seems like a lame attempt to try and attack the credibility here through Barakat, one of the most well-respected antiquities dealers in the world. But okay, man, you take your shot.
Yes, crystal skulls, most of which turned out to be 19th century fakes, made in Germany, in crystal likely from Brazil or Madagascar. Here's a crystal skull from Mr. Barakat's catalog. Aztec colonial, 14th to 16th century. Origin Mexico, collection pre-Columbian. We can't comment on this specific one, as its story is not given. Many of the well-known crystal skulls trace back to a French art dealer, Eugene Boban. It's disputed if all crystal skulls are fake. The author of the original paper thinks so. As the origin of the vases is already uncertain, their being near the subject of crystal skulls is not good. By the way, Mr. Barakat's bio says Maya skulls. The catalog says Aztec. If both refer to the same skull, somebody should get their culture straight.
You're not a child. You're a...
It's that kind of behavior that, to me, really belies your true motivations here. It's not to get to the reality of the vases. It's to score points against Ben. Yeah, I think there's better points you could be making.
Overall, metrology is the strongest aspect of the vase scans, unlike provenance and math. But there are issues. The mouth of the vase is matched to a cylinder.
And we're referencing that plane to establish the perpendicularity of the cylinder of that vase mouth. That shows in that cylindricity measurement there how cylindrical that feature is, 13 thousandths of an inch.
The vase mouth is not a cylinder. It's a section of an elongated cone, its side about 1.9 degrees off the vertical. Let's move on to...
Okay. Just seems like you're, again, like a little too desperate to take shots at these people. That's a very small semantics thing. They use the word cylindrical instead of conical. They're not exactly lying, in my opinion. That's just a small misspeak. But again, take your shot, I guess. You really got him with that one.
The handles and parallelism. Some aspects are discussed, others are omitted.
Lug handle 1 is designated as datum F.
Yep.
And that is what we use on lug handle 2 in that parallelism call out. So to each other, parallel, they're 7 thousandths of an inch parallel. And we're looking at the parallelism of those cylinders, the lug handles, to the top flat.
Let's clarify. 2 cylinders are fit to the lug handles. The parallelism referred to is between the axes of these 2 cylinders. What's completely left out is the basic parallelism between the sides of the handles, or lack thereof. On the original vase, the handle sides are up to 3 degrees out of alignment.
I just want to know, if they're leaving this data out, which you just accused them of, where did you get this data? They're not leaving it out. They're obviously including it. Again, they are incredibly transparent with their information. They are sharing everything very, very openly. It just seems like you're upset that they didn't actively discuss this feature in their video, but they're not hiding anything. Where did you get the data if they're hiding this? You got it from them, that they provided to you openly and freely. Let's keep listening.
This misalignment exists in other vases. You can't blame these flaws on age, because by your own admission, the age hasn't affected the outside of the handles. If crucial info like this is left out of the reports, it casts doubt on the integrity of the metrologists.
It wasn't left out of the reports. How did you get this data if it was left out of the reports? Where is this data coming from unless they shared it?
Signing such reports. Why the omission? Because we can now see that there were 2 shaping processes. One more accurate, for the round features, possibly derived from a rotary motion. The second one, inaccurate, likely manual, for the handle sides. This, of course, throws all Turing and 5D CNC machines creating the whole vase out of the window.
It doesn't. It definitely doesn't. I actually am inclined to agree with you. I think the handles were likely done by hand and not through a machining process. It's very interesting. Later in this video, you also explain that today, with all of our high technology, the handles would still be done by hand. Also, a 3-degree error does not exclude the possibility of the whole thing being done by a machining process. Errors happen all the time in our modern machining today. Like, money is highly regulated, right? Highly controlled. It's very they work very hard to keep all of that going right. And still there's constantly misprints that are happening. Like, you didn't disprove anything there. It is a point against it. I will say it weakens the argument a bit, but you definitely didn't just throw it out the window like you claim.
The handle sides put the people behind the vase project in a bind. They can no longer use the standard tactic of conveniently blaming all the less pretty features on later Egyptians. The handles are an integral part of these vases, and were created at the same time as the bodies. The vase team proposes a manufacturing system that cannot create anything but perfection.
I would agree. I think that would be the strongest argument for the nature of the precision in these vases, is that the tool is incapable of producing anything less precise.
If a tool is incapable of...
Again, I'm not interested in defending the words of Ben. Ben says things that I don't agree with.
imperfection, why can't it align the sides of the lug handles? A certain Mark Quist wrote a math analysis of the original vase, claiming unusual properties. The vase scan team sounds enamored because the round features
in this part. It's the numerology. I'm gonna skip past that. Let me find where we're at here. All right, on to the next portion.
Let's pose a question. If the vase is authentic, could it have been made in Old Kingdom Egypt? We'll use Old Kingdom as shorthand, also including pre- and early dynastic. A yes answer hinges on...
Whoa, wait a second. Let me rewind that back a little bit. What did you just say?
Made in Old Kingdom Egypt. Let's pose a question. If the vase is authentic, could it have been made in Old Kingdom Egypt? We'll use Old Kingdom as shorthand, also including pre- and...
Why is it okay for you to use Old Kingdom as shorthand, but it's a sin for Ben to do it? You specifically called him out for doing the exact same thing, except using pre-dynastic instead of Old Kingdom. But now it's acceptable for you to do that using Old Kingdom. And it's a lot more misleading. As I pointed out earlier, the vast majority of these vases were made in pre-dynastic times, not in Old Kingdom, and certainly not in later periods. So yeah, you're trying to shift people mentally further down the timeline by selecting Old Kingdom because it presents less of a problem for you. The further back in time that these vases go, the more difficult they are to explain. How are you? Let me pull up this real quick. Right, this is from a video that Ben put out where he measured a modern marble vase, and these are some of the pre-dynastic vases. As you can see here, the pre-dynastic vases all match, if not exceed, the measurements of the modern marble vase. Jesus Christ, I just lost my train of thought. What? Let me replay this a second. Right. So pushing this type of precision back to pre-dynastic times, back to a civilization that is still developing agriculture, presents a more significant problem for you. So that's why you're framing it as Old Kingdom here. The exact same thing that you called Ben out for doing, but for you, it's totally acceptable.
Dynastic. A yes answer hinges on two conditions: a very skilled lathe craftsman for the time, and a very stable and robust lathe for its time. Let's start with a skilled artisan. Today we have very skilled lathe artists. The obvious objection is that they work on modern, high-tech machines. But it's not always the case. Some lathe artists today recreate pre-industrial pole lathes or bow lathes, and yet they're still able to achieve great results.
So those lathes, while yes, somewhat primitive, are also made using steel, and they're working wood. Quite different from granite vases and in a civilization that doesn't have steel. I also have no idea what degree of tolerances you're getting out of these things. The comparison here just isn't a very good comparison.
This Moroccan lathe artist makes chess pieces on a primitive lathe, using his hands and feet at the same time.
Again, using a steel lathe and using steel tools to carve wood. Significantly different from these vases. It's just not a great comparison.
Lathe virtuoso
And how precise are those pieces? No idea. What's the point of that comparison?
existed in the past. Here are two mind-boggling lathe masterpieces. It's hard to grasp how the artist managed to deal with all these axes, or how this tiny spiral staircase can hold the weight above it. They were made in Germany in 1626, at the time the first pilgrims were moving to America. Next are the famous...
Okay, so those, I believe, are made out of wood, and they're made like 4,500 years later. Again, not really sure what relevance they have to these vases.
Fatimid rock crystal ewers from between the 9th and 11th centuries. Each one was made from a single piece of rock crystal, including the handle. The outside wasn't turned on a lathe because of the handle. Also, the Fatimids had iron or even steel tools. But these ewers are relevant here. Why? Because rock crystal can't be worked by hammering, as it would shatter. All work you see is the result of slow, laborious abrasion, both outside and inside. Here's the manufacturing process, reconstructed by Jeremy Johns of Oxford. The raw rock crystal is roughed out with bow saws down to a simplified shape, or a blank. A tube drill bores out a cylinder, the start of the vessel's interior. The hollowing out of the interior proceeds outward from the original cylindrical hole, using implements shaped like forks or egg beaters, driving the motion of an abrasive stone or slurry. The original cylindrical drill core is repurposed to make long vials. Since an even narrower core is then drilled into each vial, it too is repurposed to make smaller items, like beads and buttons. One of the scanned vases has walls 2 millimeters thin.
The material thickness on this artifact ranges from 4 down to an astonishing 2 millimeters.
Outside the carvings, the walls of the ewers are under 2 millimeters thin.
The thickness of the wall on the body is much, much thinner than it is in the neck and on the base. So the neck and the base can be as thick as 8 millimeters. But the wall, away from the relief carving, the wall is usually less than 2 millimeters thick. And that's a remarkable display of bravura from the craftsman.
The relief work is so good that the spots on the animals are actually tiny lenses, each refracting the animal on the other side. Al-Biruni described the trade in crystal goods. He says the appraiser who decides the shape was paid several times more than the workers. If we have a documented manufacture of pure quartz vessels by abrasion, with 2 millimeter thin walls, and to the point of creating miniature lenses, do we really need to explain a similar case elsewhere with some ancient high technology?
Wow, what a dismissal at the end there. What a dismissal at the end there. I mean, we have these ewers 4,000 years later that are a flex of, artistic mastery. There have been 5 of them found, by the way. And you just go, why do these vases, they don't even matter. They're totally insignificant. My dog is being very needy. Please go away, girl. So yeah, quite the dismissal there. Let's compare these ewers, because they actually are a relevant comparison here. And I do appreciate you bringing up the ewers. Let's compare them. One, they're coming from a culture thousands of years later. So comparing them and comparing pre-dynastic Egyptians who are still developing agriculture and going, well, they could do it thousands of years later, so this is no big deal. Major flaw in your logic there, man. I don't think you can quite dismiss them that easily. Secondly, these ewers were, like I said, a flex of artistic creation. There have been, I believe, 5 of them, maybe 6 of them ever found. So this is a dedication of labor from a craftsman spending who knows how many years working on this one piece, getting it perfect. In contrast, these vases were industrialized. That is an argument that I am making. The process to create these vases were industrialized. There are tens of thousands of these vases from pre-dynastic and early dynastic times. These were not just one-off creations. This was an industrialized process. You have tolerances within our modern tolerances today, matching the type of machining that we produce today in pre-dynastic Egypt. And you're going, we can just wave this away as if it's nothing. Let me pull this tab up again, okay? So you can see here that the pre-dynastic vases are actually exceeding the tolerances of what we produce today in marble, a much softer material without lug handles. So pre-dynastic Egyptians exceeding the production that we produce today, that's proof that it's not high technology. According to you, that's proof against high technology. Do we have high technology today? Is our civilization a high technological civilization today? Because they were matching what we can do today in pre-dynastic Egypt. And you're saying we can dismiss that, the idea of that being high technology is ridiculous. Not following your logic here, man. Not following your logic on that one. Quite the dismissal, though.
Speaking of vase craftsmanship in other eras, here's the Kolovan vase in St. Petersburg, Russia. 16.5 feet long, 10.5 feet wide, made from a single block of green jasper, Mohs scale roughly the same as granite. It was made in the early 1800s, but still using mostly manual work. Quarrying and carving took about 20 to 30 years. No offense to whoever made the measured vase, but if it were placed in this room on display, 99% of visitors wouldn't even notice it, and the other 1%.
Yeah, you're not doing anything to discredit the vases here. I could put a gold bar inside of a NASA warehouse and probably people would be too busy looking at the spaceships to notice it. Like, what is your point? You put wheels on your grandmother and she's a bicycle, you know? Like, what are totally irrelevant here, man. Completely, totally irrelevant.
Would wonder, what's this ashtray doing here? Let's keep things in perspective when using hyperbolic words for the measured vase. As we've seen, lathe masters are found across time. If Old Kingdom Egypt had had lathes, it may have had lathe masters too. Answering the next question, could there have been a lathe in the Old Kingdom, is more speculative. So we'll delay it until the final part of this video, called How It Could Have Been Done. Supposedly, making a granite object today with tolerances like the vase would be nearly impossible.
And I think he's also shown that it would be incredibly difficult to even attempt making something like this today. And we're not even sure we could do it to the level of precision that's shown in this vase today. It may surpass even our capabilities to make in granite.
You know, that's a bold claim, right? But I am inclined to potentially agree with it because there have been no vases made today. Where is the modern day equivalent of these vases? No one's made one. There's a lot of interest in this topic and a lot of motivation to disprove Ben, and no one has come forward with a modern forgery that's comparable to these pre-dynastic vases. So doesn't seem like that crazy of a claim to me. God, I am just sitting over here with the caffeine shakes so bad. I'm going to get through this video though.
The target audience for such claims goes all the way, saying, we couldn't make it today. In many US and European...
Okay, man. You really want to use his commenters as a point against him? I could pull up comments from your video. I could do the exact same thing. I won't, because that's such a lame, cheap shot. Use, again, I'm not even here to defend Ben, but if you're going to attack Ben, use his own words, not other people's. That's just ridiculous, my man.
In cities, there are granite fountains, often called kugels. In such fountains, a heavy granite sphere hovers on a very thin sheet of water, so it can be moved by hand. We contacted a manufacturer of such spheres. The required accuracy is 0.004 of an inch, or the thickness of a human hair. Currently, the biggest kugel is...
Which is exactly the level of accuracy you see in the vases.
Nearly 9 feet across. In other words, today we can get hair width accuracy on a nearly 9 feet granite sphere weighing about 60,000 pounds. A vase has a single rotation axis. A kugel must be shaped on all three axes. And it's not just the...
Okay, here's where you really start to get ridiculous, man. Your kugel there, it has one shape. It has one curve. It has one cut to make. It is a sphere. It is very, very simple, actually. The vase, on the other hand, you have to shape the outside of the vase. You have to shape the inside of the vase. Then you have to shape around the handles on the outside of the vase on both sides. This is many, many different processes, much, much more complicated and difficult than just a simple sphere, which is one shape. Everything you're about to say is completely false. I've got arguments to support everything I'm saying. You're just talking out of your butthole here, though.
Sphere. The granite bowl must have the same accuracy, so the two can glide against each other with a minuscule separation. How minuscule? A physics paper computed the water film to be 0.3 of a millimeter or 1/100th of an inch thin. So we have two multi-ton granite objects, each with 0.004 of an inch accuracy, separated by 1/100th of an inch, moving against each other in 3D. Compared to this, a 4-inch vase with one rotation axis is an entry-level exercise.
Okay, remember he just said that. Compared to the kugel, a vase is an entry-level exercise. This is absolutely untrue. You can go on YouTube right now and find plenty of people making stone spheres as a fun little hobby in their backyard. It is not complicated to do. It's pretty simple. There's no shortage of videos of people creating these as a hobby on YouTube. Show me one person who has created one of these vases as a hobby on YouTube. It doesn't exist. No one ever in the world has done it. No one's come forward with this evidence. So you're saying it's not even a training exercise in comparison to these Kugels. Then why has no one done it? Again, there's so much motivation to disprove Ben and these vases. All you have to do is make one of these silly little vases. It's so simple, according to you. Let's keep listening.
A vase is a one-off artistic object, which the artist can spend months or years polishing. The Kugels are...
The vases are not one-off artistic objects, unlike the ewers, right? No, the vases are industrialized. There's tens of thousands of them. It's not just a one-off artistic project like the ewers that an artisan can spend their entire lifetime on. These were mass-produced.
Are made in large quantities now, as there are hundreds.
And look at that. We mass-produce Kugels today, according to you. So these Kugels, which are so incredibly difficult to produce, are mass-produced, but not one single vase, which isn't even a training exercise in comparison, has been produced. You're talking out of your butthole here, dude. You're making these broad, sweeping statements of fact, and they're the exact opposite of the truth.
Hundreds or more of them installed across the world, so manufacturers have to make them on schedule. How far back in time do Kugels go? The oldest existing one is from 1979, but there were older Kugels there in 1973. This level of granite manufacturing dates back to early 70s at the latest. But granite doesn't set the records on our ability to polish stone. Quartz does, and it's a bit harder than granite. In 2004, NASA launched a satellite with 2 quartz spheres and a gyroscope. The roundness accuracy of the spheres was 4/10 of an inch. It's about 10,000 times better than the scanned vases. At this level, we're down to atomic scales. The tolerance equates to about 40 layers of atoms. If the quartz sphere were the size of the...
All right. So it's particularly funny that he's making this argument because of the arguments that he's about to make coming up. Yeah, I guess the vases are no problem. The vases are easy peasy because we can polish some quartz spheres. There's these magic space balls, so that proves we can make the vase, except that no one's made a vase. There is no vase to speak of from modern times, but these magic space balls, they prove that we can do it no problem.
The Earth, the tolerance would be 8 feet. Claiming that today we can't make a small granite vase with accuracy in the single thousandth of an inch indicates detachment from reality. Another claim...
I would argue that all of the false claims you just made indicate detachment from reality.
Is that accurate machinery came only long after the Industrial Revolution.
And bear in mind too that the technology that we have today with these 5-axis mills, not like we've had that since the Industrial Age, where a lot of these things came. These things, I know a lot of them went into private collection through that period.
Firstly, the 5-axis mill reference is irrelevant. The vase only needs one axis rotary motion. As shown before, the handle sides were done manually. Secondly, machines for boring...
Again, I'd probably agree that they probably were done manually, but no, you haven't definitively proven that whatsoever.
Cannon barrels existed from the very start of the Industrial Revolution. Needless to say, barrel boring has to be very accurate, otherwise the consequences are unpleasant. This book on forged Egyptian antiquities was published in 1912, and thus mostly covers 19th century artifacts. Already back then, forgers were using steam-powered lathes to make fake stone vases, including lug handles. The infamous crystal skulls were made in the 19th century, yet
That was a very interesting book. I read it myself. I found it in my own researches. And I'll address it more in depth in the later videos because you get more in depth into it. But if you are trying to call into question the vases that now have provenance established, to many decades ago, as still potential fraudulent vases, you also have to apply that to pretty much all of the vases in the museums, which opens up a pretty big can of worms. Again, I think the provenance argument is silly. I think these vases are legitimate. There's plenty of vases in the museums that display the same degrees of, I don't know for certain they're the same degrees of tolerance, but visually they seem to sit in the same category as these remarkable vases. And many of those are tied to specific burial sites. So unless you are alleging that Egyptologists have pulled a massive hoax, it's kind of irrelevant.
That they fooled people for 100 years. It means 19th century machines were able to make convincing forgeries.
Why is everyone spiraling over YouTube?
Sorry, fellas.
The proponents of ancient high technology.
So remember, I wasn't even sharing the screen. Okay. Remember, he just pointed out those polished quartz spheres as proof that we could create these vases. Instead of actually providing a vase as proof, he's citing these spheres in space. And now he goes on to say
we're able to make
that
convincing forgeries.
polishing is not precision.
The proponents of ancient high technology can't get enough of the word precision. Yet all examples they give are those of polishing. Polishing is a small minor factor.
That is an outright lie, what you just said. The proponents of ancient high technology only ever give examples of polishing as precision. That's just not true whatsoever. Look at this vase scan project. They have measured quite literally every single metric of precision except for the polishing. Like in the Barabar caves, they actually measured the polish on the caves. That is the only metric that I haven't seen directly measured in this vase scan project. They are measuring quite literally every single other metric of precision. And that is the focus, all of these other metrics. And you're saying they only ever discuss I mean, this is just a bold-faced, blatant lie. What are you talking about, dude? That's not true whatsoever. But let's continue listening. Let's hear what you have to say about polishing.
And precision as it's commonly understood. If you asked people what objects manifest precision, most would answer a mechanical watch, an advanced car engine, or a CPU. The precision here, the real one, comprises lots of different intricate parts, with shapes rarely encountered in nature, such as gears, threads, ball bearings, or transistors, all combined in complex, interrelated ways to perform an advanced task.
Okay. Well, none of that precision exists without polishing. The entire foundation and building blocks of our modern day precision, everything that you're just describing, it all derives from surface plates, which are a flat, polished piece of granite. You can't create any of that other precision without first creating a surface plate. Those screws and all of that, none of that exists without first creating a surface plate. That is the foundation of all modern day precision. So you're saying that polishing doesn't matter. It's actually very important. And you're also saying that polishing is all they talk about. That's just an outright lie. It's not. Let's keep listening.
None of the objects proposed as ancient high technology are like this. Using the word precision for them is called equivocation, deceptively using a wide concept for a tiny subset of this concept. Yes,
what is what you're doing right now called? I don't actually know. I don't have the word for it, but what's this that you're doing where you're accusing them? I guess that's a straw man, right? You're saying they only talk about polishing. It's a lie. And whatever. Let's keep listening. God.
Precision created the modern world as proposed in this book. But it was this precision of complex machines with intricate, interconnected parts. Not polishing. They're not the same thing. The clue is right on the cover. We see a cogwheel and a thread. We don't see a polished vase because it's irrelevant. As shown, we can
So if polishing is irrelevant, then why did you bring up those polished spheres in space earlier as proof that we could produce these vases? I thought polishing was irrelevant. Or is it evidence that, like, keep your story straight, man. I can't even critique you. I don't even know what you're trying to say here because you're not making sense. You're not being consistent. Be consistent.
Create well-polished objects like kugels. But do objects like kugels, quote-unquote, create the modern world? No. It's clocks, engines, and CPUs. In its simplest form, polishing is just prolonged rubbing. It can occur with no human intervention at all, such as the famous glass beach, where the sea turns glass trash into smooth glass pebbles. It can occur with unconscious human intervention. In many places in the world, there are old statues that tourists like to touch. Over time,
this has absolutely nothing to do with the vases. And again, why did you bring up the polished spheres if polishing is so stupid and doesn't matter? What are you trying to say here?
These spots become very smooth and polished. If a roughness meter showed single microns in such a spot, would it imply advanced technology? No, it's just tedious, persistent rubbing. If ancient Egypt was the heir to an older civilization based on precision, why did we have to wait until ancient Greece, Rome, and China to invent the building blocks of actual useful precision, like gears, ball bearings, or threads? Why didn't ancient Egypt inherit these? The stock answer is that only stone will survive between civilizations. Then why didn't the supposed older advanced civilization record such useful objects in stone for posterity?
Remember, he said that. It's going to be very funny later on. But all I'll say for now is, why didn't every other civilization do that? Why haven't we done that? I guess it's only the Egyptians that are expected to do that.
In the future, if you hear precision in this context, simply read it as polishing. By the way, here's a...
Yeah, again, you're just lying. Like, look at all of the different metrics that the vases are being measured by. I don't know why you're just lying like that here.
Curious chain of logic.
One analogy put to me by Nick Sierra while discussing this article on the phone struck me as apt. In some ways, the vase is similar to the golden record fixed to the side of the Voyager spacecraft. On the side of it is a golden record, with pictures and mathematics depicting our species, our technology, capability, and location. While Voyager, with its golden disk, was sent through space, the vase, with its encoded messages, has been sent through time. Primarily because it's particularly thin-walled and delicate. Even though it's made from granite, it's a minor miracle that it's still in such good condition after millennia. The material thickness on this artifact ranges from 4 down to an astonishing 2 millimeters, less than 1/10 of an inch. In fact, a few of these vases were unable to be centered on the rotab due to damage, and 1 or 2 of them show signs of repair where they've been glued back together, perhaps after they were found broken.
What civilization sends vital messages to the future hidden on a 2 millimeter thin vase that has to be glued together, assuming it survives by miracle? Not a smart civilization.
Yeah, what civilization sends a golden disc out into the vast emptiness of space to try and deliver a message? Not a very smart civilization. I'm not here to defend Ben's words, so I'm not concerned about that, but whatever.
We'll cover the subject of forgery in 4 sections. Let's start with monetary gain. Addressing the possibility of the vase being a forgery, the vase scan team asks, can it be faked cheaply?
I would argue with anyone who would say that would argue the provenance of these vases. I would ask them to show me how they can make it so cheaply.
Yeah.
We'll answer soon. But first, they imply gain as the goal, seemingly unaware that many archaeological hoaxes aren't done for gain. Artifacts are also faked to confirm a theory, or for fame. The cost isn't then an issue.
This part of the video, you really go off the rails here, and I truly have no idea what you're trying to say, but let's listen to it and see if we can figure it out.
Here are a few examples. Shinichi Fujimura was an amateur Japanese archaeologist who later became professional. Starting in the 1980s, he made a big name for himself by excavating basically a whole new Stone Age in Japan. Due to his uncanny ability to find crucial artifacts, he was called God Hand. In 2000, he was caught on a hidden camera planting artifacts. He admitted the hoax during a press conference. In 2006, Spanish archaeologist Eliseo Gil found spectacular inscriptions, the earliest example of Basque, Egyptian hieroglyphs in Spain, and the oldest crucifixion seen anywhere. Within a year, a science panel found them to be a hoax. Gil is on trial, facing 5 years and a ban from all archaeological digs. There's an entire book worth of hoaxes meant to show the presence of non-Indians in America before Columbus.
I have no idea what any of this has to do with the vases. What are you getting at here? But if you want to have a debate on diffusion and pre-Columbian travel to the Americas, I'd be happy to have a debate with you on that. But what the heck does this have to do with the vases, man?
Vikings, the English, a Coptic sect, Egyptians linked to Mormons, Pliocene man, giants, and unknown people with unknown writing. You may ask, but wasn't there a Viking settlement discovered in Canada in 1960s? Yes, except...
You got some serious ADHD or something. You're really going off on a tangent here.
1. This settlement doesn't make the hoaxes real. They're still fake. The settlement is the proof, not the hoaxes. 2. The Viking outpost involved 3 houses and lasted only 20 years. It's different from the claim of settling Minnesota. 3. The 80 or 90% of other claims about other peoples remain as false as before. Some of the hoaxes reached an industrial scale. The total count of the Michigan relics may be as high as 3,000. In some cases, like the giants, the motivation was both gain and confirmation of biblical verses. The famous phrase, "There's a sucker born every minute," stems.
So, I mean, I can only conclude that you're attempting to suggest that these vases are potentially entirely a hoax, but you're not being specific at all. You're being incredibly vague. You're not directly accusing anyone. Are you accusing Ben of faking these vases? I mean, he's collected these vases, some being 100 years old, so he didn't manufacture them himself. So someone else 100 years ago faked these vases, and now Ben's pushing the hoax. What about all the vases in the museums that display the same characteristics, many of which are linked directly to grave sites, excavated by multiple different archaeologists at multiple different sites over multiple decades? So are all of the Egyptologists in on this hoax? You gave that example of that Asian dude. He faked a whole civilization. So are you suggesting that these vases are a massive hoax perpetrated by the entire branch of Egyptology? Like, I genuinely have no idea what it is you're trying to say here. You've fully gone off the rails. What is the accusation you're making? It seems like you're making a very big accusation, but you're being incredibly vague with it. Who is hoaxing this? What are you actually saying here? And you're spending a lot of time on this. This seems to be an important point for you, but I genuinely have no idea what you're trying to get at.
Stems from the Cardiff hoax, though it probably wasn't P.T. Barnum who said it. His business idea of turning questionable artifacts into profit seems to continue to this day. There are still true believers in some of these hoaxes. This man, for example, continues to search for another Drake's plate.
Back at Agate Beach, George Epperson's
Again, what does this have to do with the vases?
face is undaunted by science or scholars. With his metal detector, he's combed every inch of the sand, looking for other things Drake may have left.
This is our country's oldest and rarest document, even rarer than the Constitution of America. And it's very historic and should be acknowledged.
Sorry about that.
Sorry again for the ads, fellas.
Incidentally, one of the clues for the plate's unmasking was its thickness.
Not only was the brass too pure, but the plates seemed to have been made using modern techniques.
The plate of
What does any of this have to do with the vases?
brass is very close to 1/8 of an inch thick. It's homogeneous to a 1/1000th of an inch. Within our ability to measure, it corresponds exactly with the specifications for the number 8 gauge of the American wire gauge standard used in the 1930s.
The vase scan team includes a control vase made of marble. Why marble is unclear, as modern granite vases aren't hard to get. The team notices that modern stone vases usually have no handles.
Note also that there are no lug handles here to contend.
Okay, so
The reason is
you just spent all of that time. Oh my goodness, I wasn't showing the video. It's okay. You guys should have been able to hear it. The visuals weren't that important there. My bad. But you just spent all of that time making that point and then just moved on. Like, what was the point? There was no conclusion. There was no point there. You just spent a lot of time making that point. Who are you accusing of hoaxing this? Seriously, what was all of that? I have no idea what any of that was. But now this part actually matters again. This part's relevant.
And is simple. Unlike today's stone vases, the ancient Egyptian ones were functional, meant for actual daily use, to carry or hold foodstuffs or cosmetics, even if the luxury ones were handled less often. Today we no longer use stone vases in kitchens because we have metal or glass pots and other containers. Making them with handles isn't the slightest problem for us. Stone vases today are purely ornamental, for flowers or ashes, not for frequent use, so they have no lug handles.
It's not the slightest problem, apparently, but we just don't do it. None of these have handles. The example you're about to show are metal handles because doing it in stone is difficult. It is kind of a problem, but hey, more broad sweeping statements with nothing to back them up.
Handles. If a funerary urn today needs handles, they're made of metal, as it's much cheaper. Making a modern stone vase with stone handles will be discussed later. We decided to test an actual modern granite vase. It's a completely random cemetery vase, made by some random manufacturer in China. Let's start with basic caliper measurements. The vase has small bevels at the ends, so the calipers have to be raised a little. Both the top and bottom of the vase, in 2 directions, have the same dimensions, within the caliper's 1/100th of an inch accuracy. It already tells us we're dealing with a few thousandths of an inch at the most. Next step, a 3D scan with a Carl Zeiss scanner. Here it is. A clean way to visualize surface accuracy is to slice the 3D object in half, then mirror 1/2 of the profile over the other. For example, in the original vase, you can see a disparity of 2.6 thousandth of an inch. Here are the disparities in the original vase, at points evenly distributed over its belly. And here's a random modern granite vase. The surface accuracy is basically the same. Conclusion, the original vase could have been made in a random Chinese workshop which mass produces granite urns. This is...
Okay, so it's an interesting conclusion to take away from that. These pre-dynastic vases from a culture that was still developing agriculture, that's over 5,000 years old, match the same level of precision that we achieve today with our modern high technology. Those machines in those Chinese workshops are pretty darn advanced. They're computerized, they're electronic, they have very advanced metallurgy and material science going on in there. Like, if our modern high technology is producing similar results to what was appearing 5,000+ years ago in pre-dynastic Egypt, how do you come away with the conclusion that it's proof against high technology? It's matching our modern high technology. It's exceeding our modern high technology. They don't have handles, and the measurements are actually better on the pre-dynastic vases. The inside isn't hollowed out on that granite vase. It's not 2 millimeters thin. So the pre-dynastic vases are exceeding what we are producing using our modern high technology. And your conclusion is that it's proof it wasn't high technology? How does that make any sense?
This is in stark contrast to claims like this.
And I think he's also shown that it would be incredibly difficult to even attempt making something like this today. Not even sure we could do it to the level of precision that's shown in this vase today. It may surpass even our capabilities to make in granite.
which again, I am inclined to agree with because no one has proven otherwise. That funerary urn is not comparable. It is a great comparison. It's a great reference point, but it is not the same thing as those pre-dynastic vases. And no one has come forward with anything that is comparable to those pre-dynastic vases. You keep talking about how easy it is for us to do. Why hasn't anyone done it?
Again, hyperbolic claims like this show a disconnect from the real world.
Do they? Because no one's made
As
a
mentioned,
vase.
modern stone vases usually don't have handles, as they're just ornamental. So we contacted Chinese granite workshops to get a quote on a copy of the original vase with handles. The best offer was $45, 10 pieces minimum.
So I find it very interesting that earlier in this video, you choose to criticize the vase team for withholding information, and then this is the proof you provide to an extremely significant, extremely bold claim that you are making. A redacted email that could easily be faked that doesn't actually prove anything. Now, I'm not accusing you of faking this email, and this email isn't even the real problem. The real problem is that you don't include the email that you sent, the email with the specifications for the vases. And I'm willing to bet that your specifications didn't include anything about it being 2 millimeters thin, didn't include anything about it, the interior of the vase being hollowed out, and probably didn't even include anything about tolerances within a single thousandth of an inch. There's an image that you'll show in a second, which I think is what you sent as the specifications, and you are very much withholding information here. You are not being transparent. And I dare say you're being incredibly misleading by providing this as your evidence and then claiming that they could make these vases. I don't think you actually gave them the specifications of these vases.
So here's the answer to this question.
I would argue with anyone who would say that would argue the provenance of these vases. I would ask them to show me how they can make it so cheaply.
Yeah.
And again, if it really costs $45, why has no one done this? Bring me the proof. Show me the evidence. I believe that, again, just to make that outside profile, they might be $45. Will those have tolerances that we're looking at here? I have no idea. Show me the vase, measure it. Let's find out, right? Do it. Let's do this. Follow through with your claim. But yeah, let's keep watching.
This is how, in China, here's the specific red granite that would be used. The workshop would prefer 15 cents.
This is what I'm guessing you sent over as the specifications. You give them the shape and you give them these rough dimensions of, hey, it's this wide here, this wide here. Can you recreate this? And my guess is they said, yeah, $45. But again, that's ignoring the interior. That's ignoring the actual precision. That's ignoring 2 millimeter thickness. And you haven't actually produced it. All you've produced is a redacted email that doesn't actually prove anything. If you're going to make such bold claims, you need more than what you're providing here. You are not being transparent.
15 centimeter height instead of 12, as it better fits their current setup. Note that shipping may be pricey. For 10 granite vases, it may cost as much as making them. So if someone has a spare $1,000 and the Chinese shop is still interested, we can arrange this, on the condition that one vase will be given to this channel for research.
I imagine that if you were to start a GoFundMe, that you could garner $1,000 for this pretty easily. I really hope you do this. I would love to see what comes out of this Chinese workshop for $45. And if it truly is a recreation of these pre-dynastic vases, you will deal a massive blow to these arguments, right? But I would still, honestly, if even for $45, if you could recreate one of these, it still wouldn't kill the vases for me, because there are all of the vases in the museums that are directly linked to burials that are just as impressive. So there'd still be an issue here, but I don't think your claims are actually true. Like, for $45, show me. If that's all it costs, show me. Let me see what we're actually going to get for $45. I don't think it's going to be comparable to the ancient pre-dynastic vases.
How much do such vases sell for?
Up to like $70,000, $80,000, $100,000. The more provenance, the better usually.
If a vase costs $100 to make and you sell it on the antiquities market for $70,000, that's a profit factor of 700x.
This is also a major problem here. If they were as easy to make as you're claiming, why are the markets not being absolutely flooded with these things? Why are people left and right not leaping at the opportunity to make this and make an absolute killing? Show me the vase.
Forgery for gain is clearly viable. We asked the granite workshops how a vase with handles would be made. They were a bit reluctant, maybe thinking competition will get an inside look into their business. By the way, this can shed light on why we won't see depictions of more advanced fabrication in Egyptian art. If you're making money selling well-made vases to the pharaoh, you're not going to show the details to others.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Remember how I told you to remember that comment from a while ago where he goes, why didn't the Egyptians record it in stone? You just gave the answer yourself because it's stupid. You just said it would be stupid to do that. But you had to score that little point against Ben earlier. Again, just belying your motivations here, which is not actually get to the reality of the vases. It's to score points against Ben. Come on, man.
Anyway, we got the answer.
Consistent.
A ring shaped like the handles is left around the vase. Between the handles, the extra stock is removed with a grinder to within a few millimeters of the surface. A grinder with roller attachments removes the last few millimeters. The rollers preserve the curvature and prevent the grinder from going too deep. The area is then given a final polish. One more thing.
So that right there made this entire video worth it. That is a question that I had, that many people had. How would we go about doing this today? And that seems like a really great explanation. So I really appreciate that you did the work to find that out and that you included that in this video. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks. That's very cool. Good information.
More thing.
In today's manufacturing processes.
I also would like to point out that with all of our high technology today, in our highly advanced, technologically advanced civilization today, we're still doing the lug handles by hand. So the fact that you think the lug handles were done by hand in ancient Egypt doesn't disprove high technology at all. That's still how we do it today with all of our high technology. Okay.
When you change tools or you change the process, it introduces errors. Like this is accounted for in our modern manufacturing processes, things like making turbine blades and stuff like that. And we don't see that sort of error here.
Expecting tool marks on visible.
Okay, I want to replay that because listen to this closely.
From going too deep.
Listen
the area is then given a final polish. One more thing.
In today's manufacturing processes, when you change tools or you change the process, it introduces errors. Like this is accounted for in our modern manufacturing processes, things like making turbine blades and stuff like that. And we don't see that sort of error here.
Expecting tool marks on visible surfaces of an art piece is misplaced, as most.
Where did you get anything about tool marks? I think this is the second time you've done this. You've just taken his words and twisted them. That's not, he didn't say, he literally said nothing about tool marks. And then you go, expecting there to be tool marks is misplaced. You're disproving something that he didn't even vaguely say. I don't understand. And there are tool marks on a lot of these vases, by the way. There are lathe marks on a lot of these vases. There's writings from Petrie and many other early Egyptologists who are discussing the obvious lathe marks that are on these vases, that are still present on these vases. So it's not true. It's not what Ben said. It's just, what are you doing?
Most self-respecting artisans will polish them out. These are one-off art pieces, not industrial.
They're not one-off art pieces. They are industrialized production. Tens of thousands of these were made. It is not like the 5 crystal ewers, which actually are one-off art pieces. Tens of thousands of these were made within an industrialized process.
Industrial parts on an assembly line where tool marks are left as they are.
We're the one-stop shop.
There's also plenty of examples of, tool marks not being left over. How about those Kugels you talked about earlier? We mass produced those Kugels. They don't have any tool marks. I don't even know what the point is you're trying to make. Again, Ben never said this. You're trying to discredit something Ben never even said. And I don't know what the point you're trying to discredit. You're all over the place and not making any sense.
Let's now return to the question. Could there have been a lathe in Old Kingdom Egypt, especially one robust enough to handle granite? Here's a history chart of the lathe. The first object that may have been turned on a lathe is from 1200.
Remember, he keeps saying Old Kingdom because to go all the way back to pre-dynastic Egypt when these things were actually made creates a more significant problem for him because it pushes things back another 1,500 years. So keep that in mind while you're listening.
100 BC, but it's disputed. The The first object accepted to have been turned on a lathe is from 700 BC. The first image of a lathe in ancient Egypt or anywhere is from around 340 BC. Here it is. Note that Egyptians didn't use perspective. The axes, which to us look vertical, were more likely horizontal, placed on the ground between the two men. It's a strap lathe, powered manually by pulling on two alternate ends of a leather strap or a cord. It doesn't tell us anything about the Old Kingdom. But here's an interesting fact. In Europe, there's a 2,000-year interval between an object turned on a lathe and the first depiction of a lathe. If we apply the same time yardstick to Egypt, it would in theory place the use of a lathe in the Old.
Again, this needs to go back all the way to 3,500 BC, potentially even further, because that's when these highly precise vases were being made. Despite him lecturing Ben for using Predynastic and then him doing the exact same thing. Oh, I'll just use Old Kingdom for shorthand. Yeah, most of these vases were made in the Predynastic times far earlier than he's suggesting. So that lathe invention needs stretched back way further.
In the Old Kingdom. But there aren't
a much bigger problem.
Objects turned on a lathe from the Old Kingdom. Yes, but if the vases are authentic, couldn't they be such objects? If they are authentic, Occam's razor tells us to first consider lathes in the Old Kingdom before jumping straight to a whole new civilization. With these,
I'm not here to defend the idea of a 12,000-year-old civilization. That's one of my main disagreements with Ben. So yeah, I'm not going to defend that. I disagree with that idea.
These images as a guide, let's see if a robust lathe in Old Kingdom was possible, using only techniques available back then. The grave goods of Khufu's mother, Hetepheres, provide great examples of the mechanical.
So again, he's talking about Khufu. These vases go back over 5,500 years. So there's over 1,000 years of separation between the time period that he's discussing now and when these lathes would actually need to be made in order to produce these vases. These vases present a very significant and serious problem to Egyptology and a major rewriting of history. And he's trying to, soften the blows here, but his deception's not going to get past us, right, guys?
Mechanical ability of Old Kingdom Egypt. Here's what we see. Straight, round wooden poles. Metal collars for such poles. Round wooden rods with curved profiles down their length. They can be made manually, but they're easier made with a template or some lathe-like approach. Wooden poles and short metal rods and metal-lined sockets. Wood joinery. Various metal hooks, rings, and trim. And rope-tied wooden beams. The components we've just shown are more than enough to make a heavy-duty strap lathe. Here's how.
And the components you've just shown are not from the time periods that, these lathes would need to be from.
At the ends of a thick wooden rod, we place two metal collars. Small areas of the collars may be cut and bent outward like teeth. Later on, this will prevent rotation. We make a two-part wooden frame. This part can slide into the other. We place the frame on top of a block heavy enough to not tip over. It may be part of the bedrock. On the block sides, opposite each other, two short beams are inserted into carved holes. The lathe is tied down to these beams with ropes. We place the rod with collars within the frame so that its ends fit within the small open spaces on each side. The insides of the small holes in the collars may be greased to prevent anything binding to the wood. We fill the small spaces around the collars with mortar and wait until it sets. We've done this with the ropes tied, as the tension may slightly affect the frame. We want perfect alignment when the lathe is in operation, that is, with the ropes tied. The granite block for the vase has been roughed out into a blank, similar to the blanks for Fatimid ewers. Roughing out was done with hardstone tools like these. Copper chisels were not used on granite. A flint chisel can work quartzite, which is slightly harder than granite.
Slightly more efficient than... I've shown a lot of this stuff on my channel. I appreciate you showing it. Most people aren't familiar with this kind of stuff. This is good information to include. I appreciate it.
That seems to be working very well.
By the way, in Khufu's boat pit, a craftsman lost his tools. Bad for him, but good for us, as we get to see real tools used by a pyramid builder. A 6-inch flint chisel, a basalt grip hammer, and a water jug. Smaller granite pieces, like our blank, can also be directly...
Now, I, again, don't know where you're going with this. You spend quite a bit of time on splitting granite, which has never at any point been a part of the debate. Yes, working granite has obviously been a major issue when it comes to ancient high technology and proponents of it. But the splitting granite, like just cracking granite, that's never been a part of the debate, never been a part of the question, never been an issue. Let's play what you have to say about it, but I don't know what relevance this has to anything.
Directly hammer split on a scored trace line. This works best if the granite has good natural separation planes. Aswan granite is like this. This grandmaster splits granite into square blocks like a machine. Sometimes without bothering with trace lines.
Cool.
Sometimes with a single blow.
This has no relevance.
This machine rapidly cracks granite cobblestones using this method. Granite splitting on a trace was shown with modern steel tools, but it may be feasible without. Here's how it could have been done. You find a hollow recess in the bedrock. You can square it up if needed. You insert your granite block, resting it on top of...
Again, just out of every single step of the process, this is the least significant. This is the least debated. This is the least of an issue.
Of a hard stone with a sharp top edge. The block has a scored trace line. You lift a massive dolerite hammer, such as this one found in Lisht. You hit the block, splitting it. Other variations include sandwiching the trace line between two rows of small but tough dolerite pebbles, like this one.
Say it.
99 cents per month.
God damn, they are really pumping the ads, man. I hope you're getting good money off of this.
And bashing them with a hammer, etc. Returning to the granite blank, a vertical hole is drilled into the blank, similar to the Fatimid ewers. The hole is a bit wider than the lathe's axis. For more stability on the lathe, we can drill another shallower hole at the bottom, in extra stock left for this purpose.
Interesting little fact I'll throw out there. One of those clips from Twitter, in fact, I think it's this one right here. It has an opening on it that is smaller than the size of a penny. And the inside is hollowed out. So there you go. There's that opening. It's smaller than a penny. But just a quick little share there.
The extra stock will be later removed for a flat base. We untie the ropes, separate the two halves of the frame, and force the rod out of its collars. We cut the rod in two and remove an inch or two from the middle. The inner ends can be cut flat to prevent rotation. The outer ends are sanded just a tiny bit, so they can rotate within the collars without friction. The sanded ends can be oiled for lubrication. We put the lathe together. The inner ends of the rod halves go into the holes in the blank. They're immobilized within the blank with wooden wedges, mortar, etc. The outer ends go into the collars. We now have a lathe that can withstand significant forces. It has the strap design seen later in ancient Egypt, and it uses only mechanical components known in the Old Kingdom. There's no magic to working granite on a lathe. You simply need enough force to overcome the abrasion, and a rotational mechanism that can absorb these forces without wobbling. In our case, rotational accuracy is determined by how close we can fit the wooden shaft to the collars. The lathe will probably need 2 men to power it. The operator can use various abrasives, possibly mounted on a handle. For example, used up or cracked dolerite pounders. Polishing can be done with loose abrasive on a leather strap, a mat, etc. Depending on how smooth the interior needs to be, it can be hollowed out on the lathe or with other hollowing tools. As it's done today, the ring between the handles is carefully removed to within small distance from the surface.
Okay, so, I do generally appreciate what you're doing here. Obviously, some effort went into that. You made graphics and everything, and that's cool. But you're still just like glossing over some pretty important parts here, which is like the interior. Again, maybe I'll play a clip here from Matt if I can find one. Let me find one where he's showing the inside. I apologize as I'm looking through on my own. Give me a few moments. Okay, here's a clip. So you can see the inside of this vase here. Using the methods you just described, how are you getting that interior of that vase? You displayed a picture of, what is accepted in Egyptology, which are some stones tied to sticks that are then spun around on the inside of that vase. Do you really think that what you're seeing here is a product of stones tied to sticks being spun around inside that vase? I don't. Oh, am I not? God damn it. God damn it. Fuck me, fellas. But look, here's what I'm showing you. Okay, okay, there's a good look on the inside of that vase. A good view inside there. Some more views inside there. Are you really suggesting that, let's see,
on the lathe or with other hollowing tools?
Are you really suggesting that these techniques, sticks tied to stones, are producing that? I have a very hard time believing that, and I think you do too, if you're being honest with yourself. Let's keep listening, fellas.
As it's done today, the ring between the handles is carefully removed to within small distance from the surface. To finish this area, instead of a modern grinder with rollers, we can use a small, curved wooden block with 2 legs to prevent going too deep. The wooden block can have loose abrasive embedded on a leather strap, a mat, etc. The vase claims discussed here face 2 big stumbling blocks.
So again, I don't think your little design of a lathe adequately explains these vases. Do some experimental archaeology, man. Let's see it. But I think I think you're underselling the complexity and the precision of these vases and what it would require to produce them. Again, the same degrees of tolerances that we have today with all of our modern high tech were being exceeded in more complex forms in the ancient past. It might be some type of lathe that's responsible, but I think it's a little more fancy than what you just showed. A little more going on than just that.
Blocks. 1. Are the vases authentic? 2.
Yes, the vases are.
Did Old Kingdom or other relevant periods use lathe-like techniques? The first aspect is in a bad shape, with non-existing Czechoslovakian ambassadors, no documentation shown, an unlucky proximity to crystal skulls, and the world's long history of hoaxes trying to prove some pet theory.
And you again bring up the hoaxes. Who are you accusing of this hoax? It's a major accusation you're making, but you're doing so vaguely. I truly have no idea what the point is you're trying to make with this. You spent a lot of time trying to make it. I think you spent more time on this individual point than anything else in this video, and you found it worthy of mentioning in the conclusion. Please explain to me what the hell you are talking about here, because I truly have no idea.
The second aspect is an even worse case, as it may not be resolvable at all. You'd have to prove that lathe-like techniques did not exist in the Old Kingdom. Proving a negative from 4,500 years ago is a tall order.
Again, this is why the definition of what high technology really matters, because you're trying to say that a very, very impressive lathe, not just a simple lathe, but a very impressive, robust, precise lathe, existing thousands of years before it was supposed to, is like no big deal and can just be dismissed. If we are using the Antikythera mechanism definition, that is absolutely high technology. That is unquestionably high technology. And as I've pointed out many times in this video, the comparison between our modern high-tech capabilities of today and what was being produced in pre-dynastic Egypt over 5,500 years ago are very directly comparable. So the case of, them having technology comparable to our technology today is, again, a very robust, strong case. They are producing superior vessels compared to the vessels that we are today with all of our modern high technology. And not a single person has produced a forgery and come forward with a forgery that is actually comparable to these pre-dynastic vases. You keep talking about how easy it would be, $45. No one's done it. Major problem with your argument, man. I think that is the end of the video. Let me just keep playing to make sure.
Order. Finally, an observation. As mentioned, the vase scan team thinks of the vases as a message between civilizations.
Yeah, I don't care about that part. So that's the end of the video. It was a long debunk, fellas, a long fact check. Hopefully I didn't burn you guys out. Hopefully I didn't not show my screen too much. Hopefully you guys were able to see what I was talking about most of the time. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think that his third video is when it's really going to get interesting. I mean, this was his third video ever on this channel. He's probably still trying to find his voice. I don't think this was a great debunk of the vases. Again, there were several points in there where it's just like, what is even the point you're trying to make? I genuinely didn't understand. His later videos get a lot better. So my debunks will also be a lot better. I think they'll be a lot more entertaining. I'm a little concerned that this one was boring. It's too long. It's not exciting enough. But hey, it's what I had to work with. I wanted to start at video 1, and I'm going to go through video 2 and 3. I'm probably going to try and hit video 2 this Wednesday, and then video 3 this upcoming Sunday. So subscribe, make sure you catch those. I think that the third one especially will be more exciting. But I'm going to read through the comments real quick. I saw Lee's side in the comments last week. I wish I had seen it before I ended the stream. I would have liked to shout him out. I appreciate that he's here. He is a fact checker of mine. He likes to fact check my videos occasionally. He's very good at it. He's pointed out a lot of mistakes that I've made. I really appreciate him. I appreciate someone taking the time and effort to do that. So, if you're here, shout out to you, Lee's side, although I don't think you are. Just reading through the chat. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. All right. So that's the episode, folks. Hey, Night Scarab, I hope you watch it. I hope you don't take this as like me being nasty. I'm not trying to be. I like you, man. Obviously, I'm calling you out on stuff, but like I thought this was way, way better, leagues above Dan's video. Dan's video was pathetic. Your video was actually good. A lot to criticize, but way better. And your third video is even way better than this. So I'm excited to get to it. I hope you appreciate the feedback and you didn't take it negatively. And hey, if you are down to have a debate, like a live actual debate, I think that would probably be a better format for this than these video responses anyways. I'm down to debate you, man. It sounds like a good time to me. So yeah, hit me up if you have any interest, Night Scarab. And thank you guys for watching. I will catch you this Wednesday. Date might change, but probably this Wednesday for part 2 of the Night Scarab fact check. Peace out, fellas. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, leave me a subscription. Be nice to me in the algorithm. I could use it. My channel's small. Help me grow.